one of the allegations is that he was potentially passing or intending to pass personnel details, military personnel, on to Iran has been mentioned. Now, if that's the case, that may add another dimension. That's pure speculation at this stage, it has to be said.
Mm. And if that is the case, what is the ramification there?
Well, it's obviously troubling that any foreign power, and frankly, a hostile foreign power, as that one is, should be involved in potentially assisting someone to escape from a British prison. We don't know if that is the case, but you can't, as I say, rule out anything at the moment. We have to be careful what we say so as not to prejudice any potential investigation and any prosecution, because criminal offences have been committed in the course of this escape itself, never mind the offences that he was in awaiting trial for.
But thank you for speaking to us. We're joined by the Conservative MP, Sir Bob Neill, now Chair of the Justice Committee. Bob, thanks for joining us. A couple of questions here, really. First of all, on the manner of the escape. The food delivery van with Khalife clinging to the underside, it would have had to pass through several checkpoints before leaving the prison estate. How could he have been missed at every checkpoint?
That, I think, is the most concerning, one of the most concerning bits of what happened, because you're absolutely right. There has been quite a considerable investment in prison security in the last few years, and that's why escapes overall have declined. But for this to have got through undetected, it's pretty clear that there should normally be mirrors that run underneath the vehicle when it goes through. There should be a check on the inside of the van, and there's also a system for looking on top of the roof as well, remotely. So why was it that on the face of it, that check under the van was not carried out?
And
so
of course, mirror checks are still in place. There was a question earlier about whether that still happened. It seems quite a kind of a basic rudimentary thing to do, but that's still in operation in prisons.
That's right, and that's part of the enhanced security, and it's very troubling that that's not happened. Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, who I think has acted as swiftly as anyone can in the circumstances to set up inquiries into this, was confirmed today that the gate was fully manned. So, although Wandsworth staff shortages, the gate itself was fully manned. On the other hand, that raises a question: was the supervision in the kitchen fully manned? And if it had been, would people have noticed that he was near the vehicle when he shouldn't be? Would have noticed him going missing before the vehicle had left?
All of this leans into, and this is what people will say are saying, and I think it's worth raising. Some of these aspects, some of these failures point to planning, and also numerous people being involved in this prison escape. Some of them potentially operating inside the prison or definitely connected to it. Is that a salient fear? Do you have those concerns as well?
Yes. Again, Alex Chalk was right, and I agree with him to say that we can rule absolutely nothing out. And that is a fear. That could have been, of course, anyone in the prison. And by the look of it, those straps didn't attach themselves to the underside of the vehicle by magic, did they? So that does indicate planning. Again, was the supervision of this man adequate? Was the risk assessment that placed him in a position of a trustee, in effect, as we used to call them in the old language, a privileged position within the prison, in the kitchens, was that adequately carried out? Were the people who were doing this sufficiently experienced? Because there is a real concern, both of staff shortage at Wandsworth and right across the prison system, of a draining away of experienced officers. A lot of the officers we have doing their best, but are comparatively recent arrivals. And there have been concerns that our committee has had in evidence from prison officers about training not being all that it should be. So were these people adequately trained? Were they experienced enough? Were there enough of them?
And when you say adequate training, we then have to ask the question that if it was inadequate, that they may have been open to being taken advantage of, to being manipulated.
I'm afraid that is right. You can never rule that out. The vast majority of our prison officers do a brilliant job, do a very brave job and a hard job, but there is always the risk of people being suborned for one reason or another. And obviously, the more experienced hands you have, with luck, the less risk of that. But Young, inexperienced people may well be more vulnerable to approaches of one kind or another.
So that is a real and genuine concern here.
Absolutely, we should rule nothing out. That may prove not to be the case. May have been inmates that assisted him and distracted, perhaps, whilst he was getting under the van. But we have to go through absolutely everything to find out what happened, and of course to make sure that things are put in place to prevent it. There are protocols that should prevent this happening. Normally, they work pretty well, and that's why we have had far fewer escapes over the last 10 years or so. But it didn't on this occasion, and therefore that's really got to be looked at and tightened up.
Yeah. And it feels hard to connect what we know about this story without there being some kind of inside influence or someone very connected to it. It would be a remarkable story if that was not the case. And you mentioned him being strapped to the bottom of the prison van, and that is a valid example there.
It is, and it's interesting that he appears to have disappeared so far off of the radar screen. He was in very distinctive clothing when he first came out. So the odds are he's found some means of getting changed. Did he have assistance in that? Were there people on the outside who were expecting this?
This represents a categoric failure, doesn't it? And you know, you are a representative of the government, you are chair of the Justice Committee, and it is important to call out failure, but it is also important to own it as well. Are you surprised by this story, Bob Neill, knowing what you know about the prison system, particularly knowing what you do about Wandsworth? Because I'm absolutely certain that that prison would have come up in your discussions in the Justice Committee.
Wandsworth and a lot of the similar old Victorian local prisons have come up more than once. Wandsworth has had a history in the last few years of real problems, as I say, staff issues and overcrowding and very poor maintenance. And there is a failure actually that goes back literally decades. I can remember when I was a barrister going to places like Wandsworth on legal visits, and there was poor maintenance then. We have never invested properly in the prison estate. And this is perhaps potentially a consequence of this. What did surprise me, frankly, was an escape. That's one of the things you don't expect. The bigger risk one is normally concerned about are issues of violence, for example, breaking out within the prison, which in hot summers can often be something of a tinderbox. The escape is surprising because, on the face of it, additional measures have been put in across the estate, but clearly they didn't work. So we've got to question about that. We've also got to look about the condition of our prisons. The Ministry of Justice has never had any protection from spending reductions in the way that, say, health or education do. But they are the people who are downstream and who pick up the things that have gone wrong earlier on, very often in people's lives and in other parts of the public service. So we do have to own that. We don't, as a society, have an honest enough and open enough debate about our prisons. But at the same time, the prison service, the managers of the prison service, have to be upfront about when things go wrong. I do give Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, who's been in a post for less than a year coming up now, credit for his very swift actions. But we've got to learn lessons. I think we all need to own this, that we do not invest. If you want to imprison people, because it's necessary for the protection of the public, and so it is. And if there is a public demand for certain types of crimes to have longer sentences, you don't have to look about how you're going to provide appropriate prisons to house those people safely and decently. And you can't do that without putting the money in.
Are you surprised, Bob, how long it's taking to track Khalife down? There are no confirmed sightings.
That is troubling, and that may well point to the likelihood of his having had outside assistance. When I say that, perhaps as a former criminal barrister, as much as chairman of a select committee, because very often when there are attempts to escape, if not from prison, from courts, for example, which I've seen myself in the past, the golden hour is to catch them very quickly whilst they're still nearby, haven't had the chance to get changed, for example, and disguise themselves, change their clothing, etc. That might well suggest that he had people there to go to very swiftly on the outside, and that's troubling.
Where does this extend to then? Who might he be working with? What is the end game here?
That's very difficult to speculate about. We are really in very, very early stages. Again, police seem to have done the right things. Surveillance of all the areas that he was being known to have connections with, family and friend connections, and so forth. Is there anything beyond that? I picked up, I'm sure you did as well, that one of the allegations is that he was potentially passing, intending to pass personnel details, military personnel, on to Iran has been mentioned. Now, if that's the case, that may add another dimension. That's pure speculation at this stage, it has to be said.
Mm. And if that is the case, what is the ramification there?
Well, it's obviously troubling that any foreign power, and frankly, a hostile foreign power, as that one is, should be involved in potentially assisting someone to escape from a British prison. We don't know if that is the case, but you can't, as I say, rule out anything at the moment. We have to be careful what we say so as not to prejudice any potential investigation and any prosecution, because criminal offences have been committed in the course of this escape itself, never mind the offences that he was in awaiting trial for.
But thank you for speaking to us.